Members of the North Atlantic Treaty Organization marking 75 years of the military alliance there, formed as nations recovered from the devastation of the Second World War, seeking to deter future conflict with a clear commitment that an attack on one member would be an attack on every member. Canada was a founding NATO member, but has been facing increasing criticism from its allies for not stepping up on defense spending commitments. Joining us now to reflect on the road ahead for the alliance are Ivo Daalder, former U.S. ambassador to NATO, and Roland Paris, director of the Graduate School of Public and International Affairs at the University of Ottawa and former foreign policy advisor to Prime Minister Justin Trudeau. Hi to both of you. Thank you very much for making time for this conversation. Ambassador Daalder, I'll start with you. It's been more than a decade since you represented the U.S. at NATO. On the alliance's 75th anniversary, do you think the members of NATO are more or less bounded together than when you were there?
Oh, they're definitely more bound together than I was there, although they were pretty bound together at that point, too. We were fighting in Afghanistan. We had about 150,000 troops under NATO command at the time, fighting in 7 different conflicts over 3 different continents. But today, we're back in a way that, frankly, we haven't been since the end of the Cold War. There's a real present military danger at NATO's doorstep, and NATO is stepping up to make sure that that danger does not translate into an active military conflict that affects NATO territory. So to be on 75 years old as NATO is today and as strong and united as it is a good thing. Doesn't mean that tomorrow doesn't have differences and difficulties, but for today, I think we can talk about an alliance that is steadfast, focused, and ready if and when it's necessary to act on its main guarantee of defending every member against armed attack.
Professor Paris, to what degree do you think Russia's invasion of Ukraine is defining the NATO of right now?
Well, it's clearly given a renewed sense within NATO about its core mission, which is the collective defense of the North Atlantic area. So, as Ivo says, I don't think we've seen NATO this united for a very long time. Ivo and I were on an advisory group, I think, about a decade ago to the former Secretary General of NATO. And back then, although the alliance was still unified, there were questions about what its priority mission should be. There's no question now about what the priority mission of NATO is, nor about the importance of NATO, not just to the security of Europe, but also to our security in North America and in Canada. And NATO has been reinforcing its eastern flank. It has 2 important new members, Sweden and Finland, and those can be traced directly back to the full-scale invasion by Vladimir Putin of Ukraine 2 years ago.
Ambassador, I take Professor Paris's point around a lack of kind of questioning of the core mission of NATO. The only caveat to that would be former President Donald Trump, the future contender for the job, I should say, as the GOP's nominee. And I wanted to ask you if you could, for a moment, to just reflect on the U.S. role here, because we did see this week Jens Stoltenberg, the Secretary General of NATO, basically put forward a proposal to displace U.S. leadership in the Ukraine Defense Contract Group with NATO. What does that tell you?
Well, it tells me 2 things. One, a positive thing, which is that NATO is stepping up to do more in help Ukraine and building that bridge that Secretary Blinken was talking about to Ukrainian membership of NATO. And I think that's important. I think that bridge should be strong, but it also should be short when we get to that point. Having NATO, given NATO a role in the training in bringing together the support necessary to defend itself is absolutely vital. But there's no doubt that another reason this is happening is because there are growing doubts within European circles and among NATO, the NATO supporters about the longevity and the sturdiness of American support for NATO. And there's good reason for that. We all know what Donald Trump thinks about NATO. It isn't positive. And I think that's the understatement of today. And should he be elected, it will have a major challenge towards Europe. I think Europe is waking up to that reality. I hope Canada is too. Perhaps spending more on defense would help in that regard. But Europe is waking up to that reality. However, and there is a however, public opinion in the United States remains as strongly pro-NATO as it has ever been. We've done 50 years of polling at the Chicago Council on Global Affairs. 78% of Americans think they should either maintain or increase the U.S. commitment to NATO. And although the support among Republicans is going down, it is still well over 70% of Republicans who believe that that is necessary. So from that perspective,
Right.
from the congressional perspective, where there's near unanimity, from the public perspective, NATO is strong. But there is a dark cloud on the horizon. It's not just on NATO. It may be raining on a whole bunch of other parades. But if that cloud becomes a reality, we all have to think about how we're going to live in a different place for a different time.
Professor Paris, last word to you, and it's on something that we heard the ambassador mention, defense spending. Canada has yet to lay out a plan to reach 2%. It's the only ally among all the 32 members not to. Do you think that has impacted our reputation in NATO?
Absolutely. But more important than that is that we need to have a well-equipped military to assure our own security and to make a contribution to an alliance which is also providing for our security. So now it's true that the Trudeau government has spent more on defense than their predecessors did, but it's nowhere near enough. 10 years ago, 3 NATO countries had hit the 2% target. I think this year something like 18 will, which is half, more than half. And so, there is this defense policy update that we've been waiting for a very long time. I hope to hear something about that, and I hope that it has real dollars attached to it.
I'll leave it on that note. Professor Paris, Ambassador Daldo, I appreciate both of you making the time. Thank you very much.